guest today is Jeffrey DeBellis, Vice President of Clinical Operations of New Jersey for Professional Physical Therapy. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Jeff, when did you join professional physical therapy? What year?
I became an associate of professional physical therapy in December of 2012 as a product of my partners and I selling our practice to professional.
Got it. And so before we talk about your prior practice, right, your practice that you started, when did you realize you want to become a clinic owner? Was it in PT school, or was that the goal in physical therapy school, or you don't have that goal?
No, I mean, I think at the entry point of my career, I actually began my career in physical therapy as a PTA. I worked in that capacity for a year or two, and then recognized that I sort of wanted to follow all the way through and go on to PT school. So by the point that I had completed my graduate education in physical therapy, I had been in clinical practice for close to 5 years, working in the capacity of a PTA. And I think very shortly thereafter, upon completing my PT education, I recognized, in that environment, I guess it was probably 20 years ago, that I was really interested in going and following that kind of entrepreneurial pull to find a way to open a private practice.
And is that what pushed you to go to a physical therapy school, or that followed after?
No, I think it's sort of evolved for me. My original push to go to physical therapy school was pretty basic. I was working as a PTA, and I really just wanted to, kind of get my PT credentials and have that autonomy in clinical practice. But then while in school and working as a PTA and then going through my clinical affiliations, I recognized that, I really had an interest in getting out there and opening a private practice.
Yeah, really good. Jeffrey, so you're OCS certified. At what point of your career did you decide to get the certification?
So I opened the private practice in 2002, sorry. I earned my OCS credentials the first time around in 2007. So I had been in private practice, for about 4 years when I started the process. And at that time, there were no clinical residency programs. And you needed a certain amount of time and a proof of clinical competence. So yeah, about a couple of years into private practice, I felt, having been out there on my own, that it would be a sort of a differentiator, that it would be valuable to pursue. So I went for it, and I earned it in 2007, and then recently re-credentialed, at the 10-year mark in 2017, about 3 years ago.
That's great. And what was the name of your first clinic, and when did you open?
Yeah, so I opened Millennium Physical Therapy in the end of 2002. I was very fortunate. I had two gentlemen that had been part of my early career. One gentleman named Alan Roth and another named Mike Implacido, who were already in private practice. They had a very unique sort of low cost of entry model inside a gym in Bergen County, New Jersey, where I reside. And, they were interested in expanding, and I knew them from clinical practice in prior years, and they had a great model. Both of them had tremendous healthcare experience. They're both, my senior by about 10 years, had worked in corporate healthcare and left that to open their practice. And they sort of served as a springboard for me. And we partnered them in a minority manner, to expand the practice. And that's how we got the second of our 5 locations open. bringing me on board as a partner. And the rest is sort of history.
Sorry, so there was three partners involved, right? And that location.
Yeah, those two gentlemen had a solo location that they were majority partners, equal partners in, and they were willing to create a model with me where I could use their, in essence, sort of a franchise model, I guess. It wasn't really a franchise, but
Sure.
we created a separate entity of which I was the majority owner, 80%. They were each 10% owners. It was a very flexible ownership structure.
Okay.
They each put in 10% of the cost to start up. I put 80% of the cost in, and we found a spot and we opened. So their location was called Millennium Physical Therapy number 1. I was Millennium Physical Therapy number 2, and we went on to open together several more. But I was 80% owner of that location. And again, started with, a sign on the door and a couple tables and 0 patients. And, over the course of 13 to 14 years, the business continued to grow. And that's ultimately what led to our exit through a transaction with Professional.
Got it. Okay. So that actually leads me to my next question. And at what point you realize you want to exit and join forces with Professional Physical Therapy?
Yeah, it was to be honest, at the time, I don't think that any of us were thinking, hey, this is the time we actively go look to exit. Truth told, our business was very, very healthy. By all means of assessment, we were all very happy with what we were doing. It just so happened that the 3 founders of Professional, Adam Elberg, Rob Panarello, and George Papadopoulos, had recently garnered private equity backing for their practice, which was only about 11 locations. They knew us through, the network of physical therapy in the tri-state area is not exactly huge. The world is small. And they reached out and had intimated that they were interested in expanding into the New Jersey market. They knew us. They knew we ran a successful practice. And I guess that familiarity through professional sort of avenues led to the beginning of the discussions, and sort of, one thing led to another. It was, just, we looked at it as a great opportunity, and, sort of a deal was created that I guess we couldn't turn down, and the rest, again, is history.
So all 5 locations that you had were joined with Professional.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Correct. Very good. Interesting. And so what's the history of Professional Physical Therapy? Where and when did it originate?
This organization, correct. Yeah, no, I think I'm right here. 1999 was founded by the 3 gentlemen I mentioned.
Right.
In one location out in Bayside, Queens. They had a very similar model, I guess, to our.
Jeffrey, I hear you now. You're muted for a second.
Yep. They expanded organically through a partnership model. So again, the 3 founding partners maintained an interest in every clinic they opened, but with every clinic they opened, they partnered with, I guess, what you would call the clinical director, either in a buy-in or earn-out fashion, and grew their business to 10 or 11 locations over a decade. Starting in Queens and then developing a footprint in Manhattan, Long Island, up in Westchester County. And because of their geography and obviously the clients they served in Metro New York, around the financial district, they garnered interest in investors, and eventually, sought a capital investment from a private equity firm. And that led to what has been, over the last, I guess, since 2011, 9 years, has just been tremendous growth. And tremendous success for an opportunity for a lot of people. So, sort of a grassroots effort that ultimately, I guess, through timing and very, very hard work and effort, to the credit of those 3 gentlemen, has evolved into, a pretty sizable organization at this point.
Interesting. And all three of them are physical therapists. Is that correct?
Yes, all three of them were. It was PT owned, and a partnership model, and yeah, and our business to this day is still our current CEO and COO, along with the chairman of our board of directors, actually, are all physical therapists.
That's great.
Which is something.
Very
Yeah,
good.
it's something we're all very proud of.
Wow. That's
To have scaled an organization to this size and still have people with true clinical knowledge and experience sort of in the driver's seat.
Absolutely. And how many locations does professional physical therapy have today?
At the moment, we're in 5 states, and if my count is correct, I think we're up to 100, either 190 or 192.
And what are these states?
New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. And then, of course, in New York, we're in Westchester, Queens, Long Island, Brooklyn, and New York City.
Wow, very impressive. Very impressive. So, how has the company adapted during COVID? What has changed?
A great deal has changed. I mean, obviously, the delivery model has had to change as a product of social distancing expectations and the need for compliance relative to sanitization. We've put a tremendous amount of thought and effort into implementing process and procedure that protects our employees first and foremost, and then our patients. We've gone from having to reduce our workforce to almost 20% of its normal state, being back to almost 90% over the last 6 months. So we are moving in the right direction, but it has been a challenge. The tri-state area where the majority of our business was affected, profoundly by the virus, specifically New York City and the surrounding boroughs in northern New Jersey. But I'm really proud of the work we've done across our entire business to, number one, to stay afloat as a business, because I know this has impacted some smaller companies significantly. And then number two, to be able to have recovered as quickly as we have back to our pre-COVID sort of state of productivity and employment numbers, I think is tremendous. And it's something I'm really proud of.
That's great. And did you guys have to close any locations temporarily or permanently?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a large number of our locations, upwards of 20, are located inside gyms, right? We rent space from the Equinox brand. We rent space from their sub-product, the Blink brand. We have some facilities that are inside community-based fitness centers. And as you know, in New York City and parts of Connecticut and Westchester County, New Jersey, gyms have been closed. So some of those arrangements, based on where our entry point was in the facility, permitted us to stay open, but a large number of facilities were closed. We're starting to phase back in, as most should be aware. Gyms are being permitted to open in New York and starting in New Jersey on September 1st. So we have a plan to bring those back online. But upwards of 25 facilities had to be closed by no choice of ours, just because of their
Understood. Yeah.
The fact that they were in gyms.
Got it. Okay. And in professional physical therapy, you guys have regional directors that oversee operations in each region. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fairly standard organizational structure. I mean, we're led by a C-suite of executives, CEO, CFO, COO, chief counsel. All of our regions typically have an operational VP who is also serving as sort of a regional director over a certain number of clinics. In New Jersey, I manage 52 clinics of our 190. Wow. I have a team of 4 regional directors and a director of our hand therapy service, who is an OT, CHT And then I have, the four PT directors that each manage roughly somewhere between 12 and 10 of our locations here in New Jersey. So that's the structure. We sort of look to each site to be managed by a director, and each one of those directors to have a resource and a connection in management to an RDO or a regional director or myself inside a region. And again, 5 regions in the organization. So a fairly robust structure. But again, all of those people are licensed clinicians, and many of them maintain practice hours as well, whether it's in a former clinic that they owned or a clinic that we're opening. So, we think it's really important for our management team to have credibility on the clinical side. So a large number of them are actively involved in patient care.
Understood. Okay, very interesting. And I want to touch on marketing a little bit. So since,
Sure.
starting your private practice years ago and, going 2020, how has marketing changed? What's been done differently?
Yeah, I mean, you can work backwards from the involvement of social media to everything that is, direct to consumer related, whether it's geofencing to Google ads to SEO optimization. When we started our practice, we were using direct mail to patients and handwriting thank you cards to doctors. And now, we're generating hundreds upon hundreds of leads a week, passively through the internet, right? So I think the tried and true direct to physician or payer relationship building is ongoing and will always exist. But the, true advertising all the way down to direct to consumer B2B marketing through all means available on the internet have really evolved probably over the last 5 years.
Mhm. Okay, very good. And uh, marketing to doctors, has that changed as well, or you still, in terms of when you market to doctors, is it the same way it was done, in the early 2000s, late 90s, or you'd say it's different?
Well, I mean, I think that most clinicians would contend that their strongest relationships with physicians that refer to them are a product of them referring to those physicians. You typically send patients to people you trust, and people that trust and know you tend to send patients to you. I think that's a fair assumption. So I think that will always exist. I would say that what I've observed over the past 10 years is that um, most physicians are making themselves more readily available for communication than they ever have as a product of technology.
Sure.
When I started my career, if you had a question for a surgeon, you would call their office and their secretary would put you on hold and then take a message, and you would wait several days, maybe, if ever, for the physician to call you back on the telephone. Um, Between email, social media, Zoom, text, um, you know, people that we have relationships with are within arm's reach as we are for them. So I think that's dramatically changed the way we communicate interprofessionally, is technology, right? I mean, we used Zoom a great deal over the last couple months through COVID to engage our referral base, and we're routinely communicating clinically through all of those means, which I think is an evolution from where I started 20 years ago.
No, definitely. I agree with you on this. And do you guys have any physicians on premises in certain locations?
Well, I mean, as a product of just the nature of the buildings we occupy, we're certainly inside locations where um, physicians also have, you know, their practices. Um, just by the nature of the real estate that we occupy here in the Northeast. There
Mhm.
are certainly instances where we're in the same building. Um, in some cases, we lease from hospitals in their, medical complexes. So yes, there are scenarios where we're in the same physical plant as a physician, but we don't share space in the sense that any of our offices are offices that doctors are in, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay, I understand. And Jeffrey, so marketing, when you set up budgets, you guys base it on gross revenue or net revenue, and how often you set up these marketing budgets? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? How does it work? Do you
We
even?
budget we budget on an annual basis. Expenses are obviously budgeted based on a percentage of gross revenue. Um, and that marketing budget will vary from year to year and can certainly be adjusted depending on the performance of the business. Um, and those budgets typically include everything from spend on technology and social media and initiatives like advertising to human capital in the form of our sales force and their potential incentives that we accrue for, right? So our budgeting process is annual. And it's typically a projection based off of intended growth in revenue against prior year's performance.
Okay.
So pretty standard accounting practice.
Okay, so growth revenue. All right, very good. And real estate, do you own any? There's professional physical therapy. Own any real estate, or most of it is leased?
Leased.
Leased. Okay, very good. And
Yeah.
which EMR system do you guys use? Is it the same system for all locations, or you guys use different systems?
Yes, absolutely standard across the board. We use Raintree EMR. So soup to nuts, top to bottom, the entire organization operates on Raintree. And all of our clinicians are afforded laptops so that they can work remotely.
Okay.
We are moving. We're always, a credit to our CFO, Steve Schneider, and our IT team. They're always looking to create advantages in cost and speed of function and technology. So that is always a concern, of an organization our size, and I'm assuming a concern for even a solo practitioner.
All the time, of course.
None of us are writing notes. None of us are writing notes by hand. It's been a long time, right? So we're all very dependent on technology, and like any other organization in healthcare, we're constantly looking to create an advantage there for us, whether it be in use, ease of use, access, or cost.
Absolutely, very good. And was Raintree always the EMR system that you guys used?
No. We've been through a couple. Raintree has been, as long as I've been here, which is turning on 8 years, Raintree's been with us the longest as an organization. When I was in practice myself, in advance of becoming a professional, we used WebPT.
Okay.
Which, I know is very popular.
Sure.
And also I thought very user-friendly. But we've been with Raintree for the better part, I think, of 4 or 5 years. So.
Got it. Understood. And you guys in network with most insurances, or it depends on the location?
We operate in network across all payers except for one big one, which I'm not going to.
Okay.
Cigna. Yeah, we're not a network with Cigna,
right.
but we are. We've worked. Credit to our payer relations and contracting team, our senior management, and of course our equity sponsor. We've worked very hard over the past many years to establish very strong working relationships with commercial insurance payers, to negotiate, to be in network across the scope of the practice from New Hampshire to New Jersey.
Okay, understood. Actually, I thought you were going to say GHI, is the insurance you guys not network.
No, we are.
Okay, very good. So I'm assuming you guys run referral reports. So if you were to, I don't know if you know the number, but what are the top 3 referring sources for professional physicians? And how do you even break it down? Do you break it down by referring sources, or there's a different rationale you guys use when you look at metrics? Will you look at metrics?
Yeah, I mean, we typically look at two sources of business are either, we classify them as direct access or physician referral. Even though a consumer could find us on their own accord by searching the internet or using an application, ultimately we try to recognize the physician referral source of the patient. So all medical records for our patients that are inbound, we track the primary referral source, their primary physician, and then if they're not driven to us by a physician source, or let's call it a payer, we consider them direct access. As an individual source of business, direct access is our largest individual source of referral. It probably makes up 10 to 12% of, maybe a little more, give and take the month or time frame, of our total inbound business. And then the rest of it, we're sort of categorizing it toward the physician referral source.
Okay.
There are exceptions. We obviously participate in some workers' compensation networks. They could be the adjuster on the work comp side, or the auto side could be the driver of the referral. But we relate that referral to the physician who sourced it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And you guys break it down by, when you look at direct access, do you break it down if the patient came from an old patient, a relative, or any other way, or just direct access?
No, we typically try to get as detailed as we can. Obviously, all of that information is going into Raintree, and we've built that system to have qualifiers around the source. But our EMR system links to a business analytics tool called Yellowfin, and that system is very flexible, and it affords us the opportunity to pretty much look at anything and everything related to any of the metrics that are tracked inside Raintree or produced as information inside Raintree. So whether it's trends on referrals, whether it's the location where the referrals are going, we have the capacity at any given time to look at windows of time and any qualifier related to where our business is sourced from.
Okay, very interesting. And you guys, so Raintree offers that integration, or is that something you guys decided to use? I'm talking about Yellowfin right now.
It's an option, and
So
we
it's an
sought
option
it.
you guys decided to integrate with. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. And so I want to talk about variance reports. So you guys run variance report, and what do you guys, what do you include in that report usually?
Well, I think it depends on the topic. I think fundamentally, from a clinic management perspective, we focus on several what we call KPIs, or key performance indicators. I'm assuming most people that are tracking these things are looking at some garden variety of, referrals, volume of visits, cancellation rate, visits per referral or visits per active case, which is basically your ability to retain your patients. We're looking at the construct of our charges and proposed or projected revenue per charge.
Sure.
On the revenue side, we're looking at dates of service outstanding, meaning how long does it take for a submitted claim to turn into revenue. We're tracking authorized visits. We're tracking unauthorized visits. We're tracking time to authorization after submission. There's a lot of information that can be and should be tracked and is actioned from an operational perspective.
I understood. And Yellowfin is the system that helps you with, obtaining all these numbers. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And what, do you look at the average turnaround rate for insurance payment?
Yes. Yeah. Dates of service outstanding, right? So what's your AR, what's your accounts receivable balance? And then when you're submitting payment inquiry to an insurance company, what is the average time it takes to turn that around? And then, so how long are we waiting for our money, right? And we want to keep that in the 20s as far as days are concerned.
20 days. That's actually was leading to 20 days is the number.
In that the lower 20s range is, I think, pretty efficient for an organization our size.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's good feedback. And so you guys calculate patient lifetime value as well?
Yeah, that was interesting. I know you had sent me that question in advance of our talk today. I don't know that we look at it lifetime. I think we consider sort of revenue per referral, right? So you
Okay.
sort of look at if I get an average, let's say, pick a number, one referral generates $1,000, right? I think we're thinking along those lines rather than any patient that we engage is worth this much for their lifetime with us. Or I think is something we've never really looked at.
It's very similar, right? It's
That's similar.
per
Yeah.
amount of money per referral, so to speak. Okay. And how do you guys measure net promoter score in professional physical therapy?
Well, we had been using an application called Strive,
What is it? I'm sorry.
but Strive, which is
Strive.
is a web PT offering, which is a great product. But we've been able to um, link that to Raintree, which is something that
Okay.
is unique about Raintree. Is we're using their system now to do sort of an automated query of Net Promoter to our active patients.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't
So
know
we
you could
basically
actually use a
we have
product with a different system. Okay.
yeah. The whole premise is sort of that patient journey. You know, how often, when are you sort of tapping them for that information relative to their willingness to refer to us and their satisfaction. Yeah, so it's something you have to track.
Yeah. And those surveys are done at discharge, or is it done in the middle, like let's say 6 sessions, and let's say the 12th session at discharge session?
Multiple times along the patient experience with us, from immediately after initial eval, and
Uh-huh.
then at several touch points through their length
Okay.
of stay, and then upon discharge.
Understood. All right. Okay. Very good. Uh, so, Jeff, what is considered a healthy EBITDA margins in physical therapy practice?
Kind of a loaded question. I mean, I think it depends on the business.
If it's, let's say, let's talk, I guess for someone that owns maybe 2 locations, up to 3 locations, versus, large, corporation like yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we value a practice, we're considering it for potential acquisition, or thinking back to when I owned a private practice with my partners. I think there are some variables. Number one, what is the status of the organization? What's the model, right? Is it an all-in network practice? Is it an out-of-network practice? Is it cash-based? That would sort of give me a sense of what the quality of earnings of the organization are. I would say that upwards of sort of 25 cents on every dollar is a sensible target as a margin.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen practices through due diligence that are running at 60 to 70 cents profit on the dollar. So the model matters, right? Some people run very efficiently. I don't know that you could make it if you're, it would be a challenge to operate below the 25 cents on the dollar mark. But they're out there. People are making it happen in the high teens as far as a margin goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard these numbers. I mean, I was told, but 12% is healthy for some companies in certain.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I mean, to be fair, if you have a business with a let's call it $1 million of net revenue, that where it's a single location or 2 locations, and they're operating at 80 to 90%, and they're paying themselves,
Sure.
and then profiting at 10 to 12% and reinvesting some of that in their own growth. That's, to me, that's a successful private practice owner.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Not easy to do.
Not at all. Not at all. Depending on it, especially New York.
Yeah,
Lower
that's a
reimbursement
good point.
rates. Yeah, notoriously.
And very expensive real estate,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, Jeff. So, what are the five most important reports you would say each clinic owner should run?
5. Wow.
Give me at least 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very focused on. Let's talk specifically about where the physician side. I think, or the referral source side. I think knowing what we would consider a QA report, having some sort of cadence around looking at where your referrals are coming from. We would call it a QA report. My team runs it on a bi-weekly basis, sort of looking back and saying, who are the new referral sources to your business, and what's your plan for sort of engaging them and letting them know, you appreciate the fact that they've referred to you, and what you're going to do for them and their patients. So understanding that, when you have a history of referrals, I also like to utilize what I call a referral trend report, where I'm looking at the TTM, or the trailing 12 months, and every month sort of updating that report and seeing what the trend is on those referral sources. So as an example, if you have a community-based physical therapy practice that might have a network of a dozen physicians that regularly refer. Now, regularly referring could be one referral a month or one referral a week.
Okay.
If you're sort of tracking that trend and you understand, hey, Jeff DeBellis refers to me once a month, and he has been for the last 9 months, but all of a sudden in the last 2 months he hasn't, I would want to know why, right? So I think a referral trend report is really important. On the revenue side, obviously, anybody that's managing their own cash flow should have a pretty good handle on their AR. If you're a private practice owner and you're not keeping an eye on your accounts receivable, and doing your diligence on where your money is, you're going to have problems. So I think, for the people out there that manage their own practice, big or small, you should know, at some regular interval, where the revenue is in the revenue stream. At what stage is it, right? How many claims have been sent? How many claims have been rectified? Where you are with write-offs, and what money you can expect and when.
Mm-hmm.
From an operational perspective, we like to track active cases. We're very diligent around the notion that if a patient is active in the system, they should be scheduling appointments. And so we run a very basic frequency report, sort of identifying what cases are active and how many of them have less than 2 appointments a week. And
Okay.
if they're not on the schedule, are they active, or should they be discharged? And the reason discharges are so important for us in particular is that they're tied to our outcome measures, right? We accumulate outcome data we participate with Photo. And Photo is linked to, Photo for us is linked to Raintree.
Sure.
And we don't close out that Photo account and actually get to measure the outcome information until the patient is discharged. So those two things are really important and linked together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Active cases, an active case report, and then tied to that, I would say, is some sort of vehicle for understanding exactly where you stand on authorizations, right? And we have an authorization team that manages that. And you want to know where your risk lies in pending authorization or unauthorized visits. Giving away care is dangerous, and in any size practice, I'm sure something that the people that listen to this podcast don't want to do, right, is provide a service that isn't authorized by the payer. So I think those are sort of the elements. I gave you 5,
Great.
that I think in some way, shape, or form need to be looked at somehow, depending on your system, whether it's WebPT, Raintree, Clinician, Epic.
Sure. I totally agree with you. This is and I would probably use the same ones. All right. So when you guys hire a physical therapist, occupational therapist, do you require or encourage certain type of certifications, or that depends on location? How does it work?
We hire clinicians across the experience spectrum. So we have a very, very robust clinical excellence program that I have supreme confidence in that affords us the ability to hire new graduates, whether OT, PT, PTA. But we also hire, very experienced therapists based on need. Um, and we also hire directors from outside the organization based on need. So I can't tell you with any specificity. Obviously, a license in good standing is really important. But I think it really depends on the situation. We'll hire someone right out of school and feel really good about our ability to put that person in a position to succeed by surrounding them with more experienced and talented clinicians that can mentor them. And at the same time, we've gone so far as to recruit and hire, people specifically for director roles or senior therapist roles with all sorts of certifications, whether it's a CHT OT or PT CHT for a hand clinic, or someone with a McKenzie certification for a clinic that gets a lot of spine referrals. That's sort of how we approach it.
I've been to a Hackensack clinic, I believe, the hand clinic, I think the Hackensack clinic.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice clinic, beautiful. Town.
Yeah, we have a great team there.
Yeah, very good team there as well. I think a director of hand therapy is there as well. Is that correct?
She actually works, one of our clinical directors in hand works in our Hackensack location. Sheena Pazrika is the director of our hand service here in New Jersey. She works out of our Montclair office.
Got it. Understood. Okay. Jeff, do you guys keep track of productivity for your therapist?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we do have, I would say our younger therapists are not tracked on their productivity when they're hired into our system for probably the better part of a year.
Okay.
But I think, we sort of classify therapists based on experience. So sort of that, call it 0 to 1 year of experience, 1 to 3 or 4 years, and then you sort of become a senior PT. And I think by your 4th or 5th year in practice, you should sort of have it somewhat figured out. But we definitely track productivity. I mean, visits per day, across the clinical staff for a variety of reasons, whether it be how we pay incentives to sort of how people are developing and performing inside our system. There's a flag, I think, on the clinical development side when someone's really having an issue matriculating into being somewhat productive. And more often than not, we try to marry sort of assessing NPS and customer service scores with photo outcomes and productivity. And as you can expect, albeit not what every new graduate physical therapist or OT wants to hear, but some of our more productive therapists are actually also the ones that get the best customer service scores and have the best clinical outcomes.
Interesting.
Because they're good, right? And they've been at it for a while. They're busy, they're effective, they're efficient.
Patients are coming back, right?
Yeah. So we kind of look at all 3 of those things together.
Interesting. Okay, that's actually interesting information. And Jeff, and for meetings that you guys hold in your company, right? So for C-suite, how often do you hold those meetings, and do you encourage each location to hold meetings for their staff on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and at what frequency in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the higher management level, as you might guess, there are plenty of meetings happening around all different sorts of topics, whether it's development, finance, operations. I'm in fairly routine my direct report upwards is our COO and CEO, who I'm in fairly regular contact with. I get my regional director team together once a week at a minimum. I have an administrative team that I communicate with on a regular basis. I have a sales team that I'm communicating with. And those people are in turn communicating, through the chain of our organization. At the site level, we encourage our clinical directors to run a formal staff meeting at least once a month. And we're big fans of the daily huddle. I like the idea of, our clinical teams and administrative teams sort of finding time to connect daily for 5 minutes, whether it's at a shift change or at the beginning of a shift, to sort of, transmit information and talk about, where the focus is for the day. And that's typically informal, but come prepared. Let's get together for 5 minutes on a daily basis. Everybody crosses paths. Sort of like that nurses station check-in in the acute care setting. I think that there's tremendous value in just having that commitment to doing that, if not daily, a couple days a week in the clinic.
Okay, that's great. That sounds very interesting. And Jeff, how do you guys facilitate team coherence in professional physical therapy?
Well, I mean, obviously those meetings are helpful. I think we also have a really, strong company-wide commitment to clinical education. So we do a lot of sort of physician lectures, clinical excellence labs, things of that nature, where people are interacting regularly. We're not afraid to have a good time here. So we try to bring a social element into the workplace, doing fun stuff like whether it be bowling or having a Christmas party or encouraging a clinical director to take their staff out for a happy hour. I think all of those things are provide opportunity for the staff to interact. I have regional directors having staff at their home for barbecues. I mean, I think in general, our professions are professions that are fairly socially oriented. I don't know too many PTs or OTs that don't like to have a good time or get together. So I think for the most part, it comes pretty easy.
I agree with you. Thank you. And Jeff, what is the long-term goal for professional physical therapy?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a growth-oriented company, right? I mean, we're backed by a private equity sponsor. We have a robust plan to continue to try to grow the organization through a variety of means, whether it's same-store growth in our existing clinics, through strategic partnerships, whether it's what we would call de novo growth or finding new geography that we feel serving would complement our existing business, to potentially acquiring or partnering with other practices. So that's sort of the plan, right? Is to continue to try to do everything we can to make our product and the people providing it better on a day-to-day basis, and then trying to expand that to a meaningful end, and having the investments we make, pay off. That's sort of where we're at.
All right. Very good, Jeff. And my last question is, what advice do you have for a clinician or clinic owner that's starting out or wants to start a clinic, and things maybe he or she shouldn't do in starting a clinic?
Should or should not do?
Should and shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's been a while since I opened my practice, but I do remember there being some challenging times, right? I think no matter the venture, whenever something's new, and specifically when you're doing it alone, you can have your doubts. And I think it's really, really important to have some peer resources. But I do remember, in starting my practice, sort of getting a little down on the fact that it wasn't going as great as I expected it to in the beginning. But hard work paid off, and I think the best advice I have is to recognize that you don't have all the answers, and even though you think you're doing it alone, you're not. You're always going to need help and advice from someone that's been there or done it, and I think for the most part, our community inside the profession is one of willingness to help, right? Like the people I mentioned are competitive. But if I were to reach out to them and ask for help, they'd help me, and I would do the same thing. And I think when someone has the initiative and the drive to go out and start something, they can't be afraid to lean on resources and find help when they have questions. Um, and I think the other piece of it is to just be patient. We're going to be at this for a while. I've been in practice. I've been involved in clinical practice since I was, 20, 22, 23 years old. I'm turning 48. So it's been 25 years, and I'm doing something different today than I did 25 years ago. So I think when things are tough or seem difficult, um, you got to just be patient, and stick to your plan. Um, Beyond that, I think, surrounding yourself, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded in good times and bad by some tremendously talented and intelligent people. Some have come in and out of my career and moved on to different things. But I think taking advantage of the opportunity to interact with people that know other things and can afford advice and guidance is always a smart move.
Absolutely. Okay, here we have it. Guys, just if you're driven, be patient, surround yourself with the right people, and constant learning. You could never know everything. All right, Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure. A
My
great
pleasure.
call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.